Hello guys, and welcome back to Getting Started with LabVIEW Community Edition. And in today's example, we will look into how to access any databases using LabVIEW. Now, as you all know that we can actually use LabVIEW to access or we can actually read and write values into a database. In this example, I will be using the Access database. And first of all, I would like to show the example of Access database that I'm using right now. This is an example DB. And the access format is actually compatible with 2007 to 2016 file format. And here you can see on the left column, I have actually created two different tables. One is the user name table and the material price table. So we will be using LabVIEW functions to actually access either one of these tables and display the result into a table control. Now, there are steps in how we can actually access database using LabVIEW. So I have summarized into 5 different steps. The first is we need to establish a connection using a connection string. Now, to get the connection string, you need to check the access version that is installed in your PC, of course your Office version as well, and most importantly is your bit version. Since if your Office version is 32-bit, it should be able to work with your LabVIEW 32-bit. If you're using 64, then it should work at 64 itself. Now for the connection string, depending on the access database that is installed, so in this case, I'm actually using the one that is compatible 2007 and 2016. You need to make sure and check what is the suitable connection string that you should use. Of course, the value here would be different depending on the access version that you're using. So in this case, I will be using this connection string. And at the end of the connection string, there is a parameter called data source. So this file location parameter is something that I will be manually changing using the LabVIEW function. Once you have established the connection, you need to get the table in the database. In this case, I have 2 tables, so I will be accessing either one of the tables, and you need to use the select function to select the entire data on the table, display it on the table control, and lastly close the connection. Now to demonstrate this, let us begin by creating a table function here. So we have let's put a table control here, table, and let's display this as silver. And oftentimes I would prefer my table to actually have a header. So let's show column header here. And once you actually have a table, I want this to be an indicator. And the connection here, probably the code here will be slightly longer, so probably this is something that I actually need to check. Now as I mentioned earlier, we actually need to use this connection string, and the parameter would actually involve the file path location. So let's create a file path location here. Let's put path control, file path control. File path control. And once we actually have the file path control, we actually need to change it into a path. So let's concatenate the string. Let's combine the strings together. And because this is a file path data, I need to change this to path to string. File path to string. And once I actually have this, now we can actually access the database connection function. First, I need to open the connection. Now, as you can see here, it actually requires the connection information, just the connection information to access the location of the data, the database. And once we have actually opened the connection here, once we have actually opened the connection, next we actually need to look into how many tables that is actually existing inside that database. So we will actually use the list table here. Oh, where is this list table? List table. We need to get the list of tables that is actually inside. Using the reference, it will actually return an array of tables. And once you actually have the list of tables here, let me just put in, then we need to select the table. So to select the table, we need to go back here and select data from the table here. But now once we have put in the connection, we actually see that the input parameter only requires one, and this actually returns an array of tables. So let's use index array to sort it out, and let's create a control here so that I can actually choose what table that I actually want to display. So let's put this guy here. All right, let's put him here. Once you actually have this, you can actually put in the table in. Once you have actually selected the entire table, next is we actually need to display those values, selected values in the table, into a table control. So now we actually need to use this database to variant. Now the reason why we use database variant to data is because sometimes your table can contain more than one data type. It could actually contain more than one data type, and sometimes it's not going to be string, it could be something else. But in this case, we're just going to be selecting only string data type. So let's put the connection here. It actually returns data. It selects here. Let me put this here, and the data comes out here. Now the reason why it is actually not showing anything is because we haven't put what kind of type that is actually expecting. So let's create a constant using the table control. We'll put the value here, and now it will able to return a 2D array of string value. Now once we have already selected the database variant to data, next we actually need to let me just move this here. Next we actually just need to close the connection. So to close the connection, we use the dbTools connection close connection, and we actually need to close the reference of the connection. And once this is done, it should be like this. All right, so let me just rearrange this. Okay, so as you can see, we use the connection string, get the file location, open the connection, list the amount of tables that is available, select the data, convert the data into a LabVIEW compatible data type, and lastly we close the connection. So let's test this. So as you all know that in the example database that I'm using right now, we actually have two tables, but since the LabVIEW function actually returns an array of tables, so this will probably return the index of the array. So this would be index 0 material price and index 1 username. So let's close this, and let's put in the file location here. Let me just all right, so this is the file location here. Oh no, that is not correct. The file is actually on a data, so let's put example db here. Once you actually have this, and if we run this, it should return the first index, which is the material price. So this is the values that you actually see in the material price here. And if let's say if I were to choose index 1, it should return the username. So this is an example of how we can actually access the values of a database using the select function, and most importantly getting the right connection string and the flow. We actually have to use the connection string to open the connection, list check if let's say if the tables actually has more than one value, select the values of the entire table, convert it into a compatible data type which we can use to display into a table control, and lastly we can actually close the connection using the close connection function. So this is an example of how we can actually access and display values of an access database in LabVIEW.